everybody, this is Lily from glasshouse.org, and we're back for another segment of how to work with Italian wire mesh ribbon. Today we're going to look at how to get some of those interesting ruffling and wave effects with the ribbon. And we're basically going to be focused on 20 millimeter today, but I brought a 6 millimeter example along too to show you what you can do with that. So with this particular necklace, what I used was the 6 millimeter mesh ribbon and my 2 millimeter silk cord inside. But I got this wonderful sort of free-form effect by allowing the cord inside to do what it wanted to, basically, when I was pulling the mesh. So in other words, as you'll see today, when you're working with the mesh, you usually pull the inner cord taut and then work against it. But in this piece, using the 6 millimeter, I let the cord kind of do its own thing as I pulled the mesh from side to side. And you get these kind of interesting designs with the cord itself inside the 6 millimeter mesh. And that, it will work with the 20, but there's a lot of room when you pull it. So it looks better, I think, if you want to get this sort of fun freeform look, to do it with the 6 millimeter. Now in this one, this is more of what we're going to be doing in this video. This is using the 20 millimeter mesh with a 4 millimeter silk cord inside. And I've hand sewn some beads on, and it's nice because the cord itself, if you use, especially if you can use a thread that is very similar in color to your mesh ribbon, the Nymo threads sort of have a sheen to them, and they match the colors of the mesh very nicely. So you can see on the back of this piece, even though all of the beads have been sewn on, very little of the work is visible. Most of the stitching got literally hidden inside the silk cord, and the stitching that did kind of come through is almost exactly the same color as the mesh. So it's a real neat way to work. And we'll be doing a full necklace like this in a future project video. But today I'm just going to show you how to get some of these interesting ruffled effects. And on this necklace, we don't have an inner cord, but what we do have is a piece that's keeping all of our individual strands together as a center point. And then we've kind of used the mesh to create a fringe. So I've got several, probably about 8 strands or so of mesh here, and it would have obviously all been, just straight ribbon like it is up here, but with the pulling technique you can get different effects, by pulling in different directions, and also you can get, curls, and the way that these end up staying in is by tying a knot at the bottom, maybe having a nice bead as an accent, and then tying a knot, and then that'll keep your ruffles in place. So this is the kind of thing we're going to be looking at today, is how to get these wonderful ruffle and wave effects with your Italian tubular wire mesh ribbon. I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're ready to get started, but I just wanted to take a moment to discuss the fact that all of our projects that we've really been focusing on so far tend to always have a cord inside the mesh. And I can't emphasize enough how important this is, because it enables us to do a whole variety of things that really are heavier in weight that maybe wouldn't have been good to use the mesh for without it. And one of the examples is this charm bracelet that I recently made. And this is made using miraculous metal sacred charms from France and Italy, from churches in France and Italy, that a collection that's been collected over many years. And I really wanted to memorialize these charms, so I created this charm bracelet. And what's really neat about this is I've got the 6 millimeter mesh with a 10 millimeter silk cord that's stuffed with cotton inside, and that allowed me to sew basically to sew my decorative area with the pearls and the silver beads and seed beads, and then to sew my charms right on the piece, and using, let's see if you can see it, like this. There we go. Kind of doing some fringing to attach them. And the wonderful thing about it again is that you barely see any work on the back. So it comes out very neat. All of your stitch work is literally hidden inside. So I can't emphasize enough how wonderful it is to work with the mesh ribbon along with another cord, preferably the silk cord. That's what I like to work with. And then another thing that I'd like to point out is that, especially among the 20 millimeter, but yes, the ribbon comes, as you know, in many, many different colors. I think we have about 24 colors in stock. And what I've noticed is that some of the colors tend to be heavier in weight than others. We buy the ribbon from the manufacturer by weight. And so the colors on our website that are a little bit more expensive in the 20 millimeter, it's because they have a heavier weight, they have a heavier texture. And the heavier weight mesh ribbons, I think, are the best ones to use for ruffling necklaces, especially when they're going to have maybe a heavy pendant or something else with them, because they hold their shape the best. Okay, I'm going to put my mesh ribbon onto the back of my crochet hook, and I'm going to pull the silk cord through just like I did in a previous video. Okay. Now, for brevity's sake, I'm not going to actually put a piece together right now, but what I am going to do is show you how to get the ruffling effects once your cord is inside the mesh. You basically, if you want to keep your cord straight so it doesn't squiggle off on its own, then you should definitely hold one side as you're working. And you can see just by pulling the mesh out from side to side, you can see like it very easily would give you that squiggly cord effect. But you're not going to want that in every piece. So you just basically pull again so your cord stays straight. So don't worry about your cord as much when you're working on creating the ruffles, because you can just pull it and straighten it out as you go. Now, if you want this to be tighter, you can also push from this end so you get these different effects here, and then you can sort of pull it out, and that'll give you a much tighter look. But you can imagine how much mesh that would take to make a necklace. You'd probably need at least 2 meters. So it really depends on the kind of look you want. This is a look that's much more sort of flowing and wave-like, and then this over here, you know, is bunched up. So for instance, you could make a wonderful hair piece by just bunching it up. Like that. Or if you don't like it, just pull it back out and work with it loosely. Now, one way you can keep these ruffles intact in a finished piece is by tying sections of them off with wire mesh ribbon or another cord. Or you can obviously put beads on them and knot them in place. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. The mesh makes it a wonderful needle of its own simply by rolling the ends Right now I'm rolling it with my silk cord because I have a bead that has a big enough hole that I'm going to slip on. And so this is a metallic a pony bead, larger pony bead, with a nice big hole. Looks like it's about a 5mm hole. And I'm just going to slip that on. And knot that bead in place. Now, to get started, you can just use your fingers. You don't need a knotting awl. But for the second knot, you're probably going to want to use it. So you can just make a nice sort of decorative, nice fat knot that keeps that bead in place using both the cord and the wire mesh ribbon, obviously, as because you're knotting the whole piece. So basically you're slipping both through. So down here where I've got more ribbon, more cord than I do ribbon, I just have to be careful that I don't end up pushing all of my cord back, all of my wire mesh ribbon back as I slip through the knot. Okay, so I've just used my fingers to guide that knot into place. And you can see that the knots themselves look pretty decorative as well. You can kind of get in a little bit. You can sort of mold them with your fingers. And now if you were going to make another section, you'd pull out the mesh as far as you want it to go. And you basically can use the cord to sort of pull and work against if you want to bunch it up more. You want to have it be a little bit tighter. And another thing you can do is you can manipulate your ends so you get the kind of wave effect that you would like. So if you want, on the piece that I showed you at the beginning of the video as an example, I had made them almost look like sort of pressed leaves by just sort of manipulating my edges with my finger just to get the kinds of curves that I want, but I don't want them to stick up. So you can sort of roll the edge and then just press it down. And that'll give you a different effect than if it sort of sticks up like a ruffle. Or you can just let it do its own thing and, enjoy the spontaneity of, what happens. But I kind of tend to manipulate it a little bit more if I'm trying to make it more of a flatter piece. So now I'm going to put my other knot, again just using my fingers. Okay, and you can see how once you have that second knot in, the ruffle is going to have a much better tendency to stay put because it's really not bearing any weight whatsoever. So that's when you can really kind of come in and mold it into the shape that you'd like to have. And this is especially useful for when you're photographing your pieces, to get them to lay just as you want them to. And the other thing is that obviously as you're wearing a piece, if it stretches out or if some of the waves kind of pull and it loses its shape, it's so easy, even as the wearer, to just kind of come in and reshape it and get it to look the way you want. Now the other thing you can do is sort of push against the cord, kind of pulling the cord at one end and pushing the mesh itself down the cord. And that'll give you a more bunched effect, which you then can manipulate. And this is a great technique for making bracelets. And again, you still want to use, the thicker, the titanium, the bronze, the silver blue, the pale pink. Those are all heavier weight colors that work best for this kind of molding and shaping. But if you wanted to make a bracelet, you could pretty much with a meter of the 20 millimeter, you could scrunch it up pretty good and have the whole bracelet sort of cover your wrist like a cuff. Now on this end you can see that we've run out of our mesh ribbon, and say we were ending our piece and we just wanted to have the part that was going to go in the back of our neck just be silk cord and not have the mesh around it in order to save some material costs, because yes, the mesh is more expensive than the silk cord, and also the silk cord is very nice around the back of your neck. So what I've done here is I've just taken the mesh ribbon and the little bit that was left at the end, and I've just wound it around the silk cord, just kind of molded it around. So you can see that it's nicely and firmly in place. And then I'm just going to make a knot and include that whole section that's wound around inside my knot. And I've already threaded my bead on here. So I'm just going to go through and just kind of, that just becomes, the part that you joined just becomes part of the knot itself. And you can do that a couple of times if you need to. And that'll give you more of the silk cord itself will just sort of be wrapped around that knot. So it will look decorative, but it will also securely keep the mesh and the silk cord joined. And you can just trim any little straggly bits. And then I've slipped on a bead. Kind of shape your knot. And then knot your silk cord in place. You might want to have sort of a 2-loop pass through in order to make it nice and big. This one I didn't necessarily need to do twice because it might be a little bit larger than I would generally like it, but there we go. So we still have this end left, and you can see that once we start to work with it, it's obviously going to have the squiggly effect if we don't pull our silk cord straight. So this is just 3 different effects that you can get with pulling. So you can either let your cord go freeform inside, so you get the squiggly effect. You can keep your cord taut inside, and then remember how I showed you how to manipulate the edges. or you can bunch up against your cord and get a more tighter sort of look, depending on what you're doing. Now, all of the ruffling does take a lot of mesh ribbon. So, like for instance, if you want about a 20-inch necklace, like the one that I showed you earlier, let's take a look at that again. And now you have more context. And you can see that this one started out with 1.5 meters of the mesh ribbon. And I had to cut my silk cord down, so it's about a 20-inch necklace. So depending on how much ruffling you do is definitely going to affect the amount of ribbon you need. But either way, you get wonderful results, and the more you play with it, you'll find the more things you'll discover and the more fun ways you'll figure out to use it. And that about does it for today. This is Lily from glasshouse.org. Thanks so much for tuning in. And we'll be back with some future videos on how to use Italian wire mesh ribbon. But until then, happy beading, and thanks for watching.